The gunshot cracked through the October night like breaking glass. I was halfway through my double shift, stepping out of Chicago Memorial's emergency entrance for 30 seconds of cold air and silence, when I saw him fall. A man in an expensive suit, collapsing against the concrete barrier near the ambulance bay. His hand pressed to his side where dark blood spread like spilled ink. 3 men ran from the parking structure. Their footsteps echoed against asphalt, swallowed by the city's distant hum. They didn't look back. I should have run inside. Should have called security. Let someone else handle the body crumpling 15 feet away. But my legs moved before my brain caught up, nurse instinct overriding every self-preservation signal screaming through my nervous system. "Sir, stay still." I dropped to my knees beside him, my hands already assessing the wound. Gunshot to the lower abdomen, right side, bleeding heavily but not arterial. He'd live if I could stop the hemorrhaging. "I'm a nurse. I'm going to help you." His eyes opened, dark, impossibly dark, with a clarity that shouldn't exist in someone losing this much blood. He stared at me like he was memorizing my face, cataloguing every feature with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You should run," he whispered. His accent carried Mediterranean edges, Italian, maybe. "They might come back. I don't run from people who need help." I pressed my hands against the wound, applying pressure. Blood soaked through my scrubs, warm and sticky. "What's your name?" "Luca." A ghost of something, pain or amusement, I couldn't tell, crossed his features. Luca Moretti. The name meant nothing to me. Should it have? I was too focused on keeping him conscious, keeping him breathing, shouting toward the emergency entrance for help that felt miles away instead of yards. His hand closed around my wrist. "Strong, despite everything. You have kind eyes," he murmured. My mother had kind eyes. "Save your strength. Help is coming, Sophia." He read my name tag with difficulty, his vision starting to blur. Pretty name. Old-fashioned. My mother liked old things. I don't know why I told him that. Why I offered personal information to a dying stranger bleeding out on hospital concrete. "Stay with me, Luca. Keep talking." But his eyes rolled back, his grip on my wrist loosening. His body went slack beneath my hands. No. I checked his pulse. Thready but present. "Don't you dare die on me." The A-team burst through the doors with a gurney in controlled chaos. They moved him with practiced efficiency, and I stepped back, my hands raised and dripping, watching them disappear into the building. The same building I'd need to return to finish my shift, to document what happened, to wash his blood from my skin. I was still standing there, shaking and trying to process, when the black SUVs arrived. 3 of them, tinted windows reflecting streetlight like mirrors. They moved in formation, blocking both exits from the ambulance bay, with the precision of people who'd done this before. Men emerged wearing suits that cost more than my monthly rent, their expressions carved from stone. The largest one approached me. Scarred face, graying temples, eyes that had seen things I couldn't imagine. He stopped just close enough to be threatening, taking in my blood-soaked scrubs with calculating assessment. "You touched him," he said. Not a question, an accusation. He was dying. "I'm a nurse. You saw his face. You know his name." He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. Luca Moretti, the same man, standing in what looked like a corporate boardroom. "Do you know who he is?" Should I? Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. "You really don't know." "Know what?" He gestured, and 2 more men materialized on either side of me. Not touching, but close enough. Too close. Escape routes vanishing with each passing second. "Come with us, Miss Chun." He'd read my name tag too. "For your protection. I need to finish my shift. Your father will be contacted and cared for. Mr. Moretti would want to thank you personally for saving his life." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "And he always gets what he wants." The hospital doors stood 20 feet away. Freedom, safety, the normal life I'd been living 5 minutes ago. But the men surrounding me made it clear that life had ended the moment I pressed my hands against Luca Moretti's wound. "This isn't a request, is it?" I whispered. No, Miss Chun, it's not. The penthouse occupied the entire 40th floor of a building that probably had its own zip code. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Chicago's skyline like a postcard. The city lights glittering against the lake's darkness. Everything screamed money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself, that simply existed in Italian marble and custom furniture and artwork I recognized from my art history elective. I stood in the center of the living room, still wearing scrubs stiff with dried blood, while armed men positioned themselves at every exit. Not guarding me, guarding everyone else from me? Or me from leaving? The distinction felt meaningless. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Luca, is he alive?" "In surgery." The scarred man Marco, he'd finally introduced himself as gestured toward a hallway. "Private surgical suite, 10th floor, best trauma team in the state. I need to go home. My father has dialysis in the morning. He needs his medications. He's already handled." A new voice, crisp and accented, emerged from that same hallway. Luca Moretti walked toward me like a man who hadn't been dying 3 hours ago. He moved carefully, his hand pressed to his bandaged side beneath a black shirt, but his eyes held that same unnerving clarity. Those dark, consuming eyes that had memorized my face on blood-stained concrete. "You should be resting," I said automatically. "The wound will heal." He stopped a few feet away, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Thanks to you, anyone would have done the same." No, the word came absolute. Most people would have run. You didn't. Why? I'm a nurse. It's what I do, even for strangers bleeding in parking lots. His lips curved slightly. Even when 3 men just tried to kill that stranger? The reality I'd been avoiding crashed over me. "Who are you?" "Really? Does it matter?" He moved closer, limping slightly. "What matters is that Alessandro Vitali's men saw you save me. They saw your face, learned your name, watched you climb into my car. By now, they know where you live, where you work, where your father receives treatment twice weekly at Chicago Memorial's dialysis center." My blood went cold. "You're threatening my father." "I'm telling you the truth." Luca's expression hardened. "I'm not the one who'll hurt him. But Alessandro will, to get to me. That's how this works, Sophia. That's the world you stepped into the moment you pressed your hands against my wound. Then protect him." Desperation clawed at my throat. "You have all this." I gestured at the obscene wealth surrounding us. "Protect him and let me go. I am protecting him." He pulled a folder from the side table, extending it toward me. "And you?" My hands shook as I opened it. A contract printed on heavy paper that probably cost more per page than my entire nursing textbook. The terms were laid out with legal precision. 6 months as Luca Moretti's personal nurse, living in his residence, available for medical care as needed. Salary, $200,000, paid in full upon completion. The number punched the air from my lungs. That was 3 years of dialysis treatments. That was my father's medication costs covered. That was the medical school debt I'd abandoned when Mum died and I'd had to drop out to work full-time. That was a cage with golden bars. "You want to buy me," I whispered. "I want to keep you alive." Luca leaned against the table, exhaustion finally showing in the tightness around his eyes. "The contract makes you my employee, my responsibility, under my protection. Alessandro won't touch what belongs to me. It's the only way. For 6 months. 6 months for the immediate danger to pass. For me to handle the situation permanently." His gaze held mine. "After that, you're free. You walk away with enough money to change your life and your father's. All I ask is that you keep me." Breathing until then. I stared at the contract, at the signature line waiting for my name. Every instinct screamed to run, to refuse to find another way. But my father's pale face flashed through my mind, his increasing weakness. The treatments we could barely afford, the reality that without insurance his nephrologist had given him 2 years, maybe 3. "My father comes with me," I said quietly. "He stays here, where I can care for him, where he's safe. Already arranged." Luca straightened. wincing slightly. The medical suite on the 12th floor is being prepared now. Private nurse, full dialysis equipment, anything he needs. And after 6 months, when I leave? Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then you leave, if that's what you want. The qualifier hung heavy between us. I picked up the pen, my hand hovering over the signature line. This was insane. I was signing myself over to a man I'd met 3 hours ago, a man who commanded armed guards and survived assassination attempts and spoke about violence like discussing weather patterns. But my father was dying and I was drowning, and Luca Moretti was offering a life raft even if it came with shackles. I signed my name. Luca's expression shifted satisfaction and something deeper, something that looked almost like relief. He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. My driver will collect your things and your father within the hour. Marco will accompany them to ensure safety. That fast? I don't waste time, Sophia. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell cedar and antiseptic blood and expensive cologne. Welcome to your new life. Try not to regret saving mine. His fingers brushed mine as he took the contract, and electricity shot up my arm. I already regretted everything. My father cried when he saw the medical suite. Not the quiet tears of sadness I'd grown accustomed to over the past year, but something different. Relief, maybe, or disbelief that a room like this could exist outside of fantasy. The space was larger than our entire apartment had been. Hospital-grade equipment lined one Waller dialysis machine that looked like it belonged in a sci-fi film. Monitoring systems with screens that displayed vitals in real time. A adjustable bed that probably cost more than my car. Windows overlooked the lake, and someone had already hung photos I recognized from our old living room. Sophia, what did you do? Dad's voice shook as he lowered himself into the recliner positioned beside the bed. His hands, weathered and thin, gripped the armrests like anchors. Who is this man? Someone who needed help. I knelt beside him, arranging his medications on the side table with practiced efficiency. And someone who's helping us in return. For 6 months. He'd read the contract I'd shown him in the car, his silence speaking volumes. Then what? Then we have enough money for your treatments. For everything. I forced brightness into my voice. You'll get better, Dad. Really better. He touched my cheek with his palm, the gesture achingly familiar. And what does it cost you? Everything. Nothing. I didn't know anymore. Just time, I lied. The days blurred into routine with disturbing ease. I learned the penthouse's rhythms Marco's morning security briefings. Bianca's arrival at dawn to prepare breakfast that could feed an army. The quiet hum of men moving through spaces I wasn't supposed to notice. The housekeeper was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an accent that matched Luca's, and she watched me with an expression I couldn't decipher. You're different from the others, she said on my 3rd morning, handing me an espresso I hadn't requested but desperately needed. Others? The women Mr. Moretti brings here. Bianca wiped down counters that were already spotless. They leave after a night, maybe 2. You're still here. I'm his nurse. It's different. Her smile was knowing and sad. If you say so, Piccola, but be careful. Men like him, they consume everything they touch. Luca himself was a ghost. He'd disappear before dawn, returning after midnight if he returned at all. Sometimes I'd hear his voice through walls, speaking rapid Italian that sounded like threats wrapped in silk. Other times I'd catch glimpses of him in the hallway, his suit jacket discarded, exhaustion carving shadows beneath his eyes. But when he was present, I felt it. His attention was a physical weight, a heat that prickled across my skin whenever I entered a room. I'd find him watching me care for my father, his expression unreadable, his body language screaming controlled violence even in stillness. You're good with him, Luca said one afternoon, appearing in the medical suite's doorway while Dad napped. Patient, gentle. He's my father. Of course I am. Not everyone is. He moved closer, his gaze tracking the IV line I was adjusting. Father used to say compassion was weakness, that caring about people made you vulnerable. What do you think? I think he was right, Luca's jaw tightened. And I think I stopped caring what he thought the day he died. There was history there, pain buried beneath expensive suits and controlled expressions. I wanted to ask, to understand the man who'd trapped me in luxury and called it protection. But he turned away before I could find the words, disappearing back into whatever darkness occupied his days. At night, I'd lie in my room, a space larger than any I'd ever inhabited, with sheets that felt like clouds and silence so complete it screamed, and listened to him pace his office next door. Back and forth, like a caged animal measuring its prison. We were both trapped, I realized, just in different ways. On my 5th night, I woke to the sound of running water. Not the gentle flow of a faucet, but something urgent, desperate. I pulled on my robe and followed the sound to the bathroom at the end of the hallway. The door stood ajar. Steam escaped into the corridor, carrying the metallic scent of blood. "Luca?" I pushed the door wider. He stood at the sink, shirtless, pressing a towel against his ribs. Blood soaked through the white fabric, dripping onto marble that cost more than most people's cars. His reflection in the mirror showed gritted teeth, controlled agony, the mask he wore cracking around the edges. "Get out, Sophia!" His voice came strained. "This isn't your concern." But I was already moving, my nurse instinct overriding every boundary we'd carefully maintained. The wound was a knife slash, maybe 4 inches long, across his left ribs. Not deep enough for stitches, but close. Too close. What happened? Business. He tried to move away, but I caught his wrist. "Sit down before you pass out, and I have to drag you to the medical suite." "I don't need. You're bleeding on Italian marble and arguing with a nurse. Sit down for a long moment." We stared at each other, his dark eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch, my pulse hammer against my throat. Then, impossibly, his lips curved. "You're bossy when you're worried. I'm not worried. I'm professionally concerned." I guided him to the closed toilet seat. "There's a difference." "Is there?" His hand caught mine, holding it against his chest where his heart thundered. "Because you're shaking, Bella, and it's not from fear." He was right. God help me, he was right. Tending Luca's wounds became routine in a way that should have terrified me. He'd return in the dark hours before dawn, blood on his knuckles or a fresh bruise darkening his jaw, and I'd be waiting. Not because he never asked, but because I couldn't sleep knowing he was out there, doing things I didn't want to imagine, getting hurt in ways I couldn't prevent. "You should be sleeping," he said on the 7th night, finding me in the kitchen with chamomile tea I wasn't drinking. "So should you." I set down my cup, taking in the split lip and scraped knuckles. "Medical suite? Or here?" "Here is fine." He lowered himself onto the bar stool with careful control, exhaustion bleeding through his usual armor. I cleaned his knuckles in silence, dabbing antiseptic that must have stung, but he never flinched. His hands were beautiful despite the damage, long fingers, calloused palms, a thin scar across his left thumb that looked old, permanent. "How did you get this?" I traced the scar without thinking. "My brother." His voice went distant. "Enzo. We were kids, maybe 8 and 10. He dared me to steal cannoli from our grandmother's kitchen before dinner. I grabbed the knife wrong. Past tense. We're kids." The grief in those 2 words made my chest ache. "What happened to him?" "He died protecting me." Luca's jaw tightened, muscle jumping beneath skin. 3 years ago. Wrong place, wrong time, my enemies instead of his. He took the bullet meant for my spine. "Luca, don't." He pulled his hand away, but gently. "Don't offer comfort for choices I made. Enzo died because I brought war to our family. Because I wasn't careful enough. Wasn't smart enough to see the trap before we walked into it. You can't blame yourself for someone else's violence. Can't I?" His dark eyes met mine, and I saw the truth living there. He blamed himself for everything, every death, every casualty, every consequence of the life he'd chosen or been born into. "My mother thinks I'm a businessman. She lives in Tuscany, in the house my father built, believing her son imports wine and olive oil. I call her every Sunday and lie about meetings and contracts and normal things that don't involve blood. The vulnerability." In his confession stole my breath. This was the real Luca. Beneath the expensive suits and controlled violence, a man carrying guilt like stones in his pockets, drowning slowly and pretending he could still breathe. "She must miss you," I said quietly. "She misses who I used to be. Before Enzo died, before I became this." He gestured at himself, at the penthouse, at the world of danger surrounding us. "Sometimes I miss him too." We sat in silence, the city glittering beyond the windows. Two people bound by blood and contracts, and something neither of us wanted to name. I finished bandaging his knuckles, but my hands lingered, and he didn't pull away. "Tell me about you," he said finally. "Before all this, what did Sophia Chun dream about when she wasn't saving dying strangers?" Medical school. The old dream tasted bitter on my tongue. I wanted to be a doctor. Trauma surgery specifically. I finished 3 years before my mother got sick, and then I shrugged. Life happened. She needed care, then Dad needed care, and the debt kept growing until dreams seemed like luxuries I couldn't afford. You could go back. It wasn't a question, but something heavier. An offer. "Finish your degree. I'll pay for it." "Why would you do that?" "Because you're wasting your talent changing my bandages in the middle of the night." He caught my chin, tilting my face up to meet his gaze. "Because you deserve more than survival, Sophia. You deserve to live." The kindness in his words felt more dangerous than any threat. Men like Marcus had offered me pretty words wrapped around empty promises. Men like Luca offered concrete things: money, protection, futures I had stopped believing in, and that terrified me more than his violence ever could. "I don't trust this," I whispered. "Any of this. You saving me by trapping me, offering me dreams while keeping me caged." "I know." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I hated how my body responded, how heat pooled low in my stomach despite everything. "You'd be a fool to trust me. But trust this. I keep my promises, Sophia. Always." "Why?" The question burst out raw and desperate. "Why do you care? I'm nobody. Just a nurse who happened to be in the wrong place." "The right place," he corrected, his hand catching my wrist, pressing my palm flat against his chest where his heart thundered beneath muscle and bone. "You were in exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment, and you didn't hesitate to save me, even though you knew what I was. Even though every instinct probably screamed to run." "I didn't know what you were." "Liar." The word came soft, almost gentle. "You knew. Maybe not the details, not my name or my business, but you recognized danger when you saw it. And you pressed your hands against my wound anyway." He was right. God, he was right. I'd seen the expensive suit, the calculated violence in his eyes even as he died, the way his men arrived with military precision. I'd known, on some instinctive level, exactly what Luca Moretti was. And I'd saved him anyway. The explosion shattered my world at 2 a.m. Not a bomb gunfire. Multiple weapons echoing through the penthouse like thunder trapped in glass and steel. I bolted upright, my heart hammering against my ribs, every nurse instinct screaming that those sounds meant casualties. Meant blood, meant death arriving in the middle of the night. "Dad." I ran to his suite, finding him already awake, his face pale in the emergency lighting that had activated automatically. Marco burst through the door, his weapon drawn, his scarred face carved from stone. "With me. Now. Don't ask questions." He pulled us into the hallway as more gunfire erupted from somewhere below. Men shouted in Italian, and I heard Luca's voice cutting through the chaos, cold, commanding, absolutely lethal. Marco shoved us through a door I'd never noticed, hidden in the wall paneling. Behind it, a reinforced panic room, my brain supplied with monitors showing camera feeds of the penthouse. I watched the screens in horror as armed men moved through spaces I'd learned to call home. As Luca's security team engaged them with practiced efficiency. "Stay here," Marco ordered. "Don't open this door for anyone except me or Mr. Moretti. Understand?" I nodded, my arm around my father's shoulders, feeling him shake. His heart couldn't handle this stress, his weakened body already struggling with the dialysis schedule. If this escalated, if the panic triggered cardiac arrest, the door sealed with a hydraulic hiss. Time became elastic. Minutes felt like hours as we watched the monitors, as bodies fell and men retreated. As Luca moved through the penthouse like death incarnate. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt dark with blood. His or someone else's, I couldn't tell. But his movements were controlled, precise, every action calculated for maximum efficiency. He was beautiful and terrible, and I couldn't look away. Finally, silence. Marcos's voice crackled through the intercom. Clear. Mr. Moretti wants you out. The door opened. I helped my father to his feet, my medical training cataloguing his elevated pulse, his shallow breathing, the tremor in his hands. He needed rest, needed calm, needed everything this penthouse couldn't provide right now. We emerged into a living room that looked like a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the walls. Glass from shattered windows crunched beneath my feet. The copper scent of blood hung heavy in recycled air. And Luca stood in the center of it all, his knuckles bloody, his expression carved from ice. He was giving orders in rapid Italian, his voice cold enough to freeze blood, until his gaze landed on me. Everything changed. The ice cracked. He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, his hands framing my face, tilting my head back to check for injuries with shaking fingers. His eyes blazed with something that looked like fury and relief and fear all tangled together. "You're okay," he breathed, the words more for himself than me. "You're okay, you're safe, grazie a Dio. I'm fine." I caught his wrists, feeling his pulse race beneath my fingers. "We're both fine," Luca breathed. He pulled me against his chest, his arms banding around me with crushing force, his face buried in my hair. I felt him trembling, this man who moved through violence like breathing, who'd just killed people in his own home, shaking like a leaf because I was safe. "Mr. Moretti," Marco approached carefully. "We should move her. Move them both. This location is compromised." "I know." Luca's voice came muffled against my hair, his breath warm on my scalp. But he didn't let go. Couldn't, maybe, his body broadcasting what his words wouldn't, that seeing me in danger had broken something in him. Finally he released me, stepping back but keeping one hand on my shoulder, like he needed the contact to remember I was real. His gaze shifted to my father, who watched us with knowing eyes. "Sir, I apologize, don't." Dad's voice was stronger than it should be after the terror we'd just survived. "Just keep her safe. That's all I ask." "With my life," Luca promised, and the weight in those 3 words made my chest constrict. Later, after Dad was settled back in his suite with round-the-clock security, after the bodies were removed and the glass swept away, after the adrenaline faded and left me hollow, Luca appeared in my doorway. 3 a.m. The sky still dark beyond windows that would need replacing. He'd showered, changed into black clothes that made him look like the shadow of death, but his eyes still held that wild edge. "Pack a bag," he said quietly. "Enough for a few weeks. Comfortable clothes, nothing fancy." "What? Why, we're leaving Chicago." His jaw tightened. "It's not safe here anymore. Alessandro knows where you are. What do you mean?" He stopped himself, redirecting. "What you represent. As long as you're in this city, you're a target. Where are we going?" "Somewhere they can't reach us." He moved into the room, his presence filling the space. "Somewhere I can keep you safe while I handle this permanently." My father's words echoed in my head, spoken while Luca arranged security. "He looks at you the way your mother looked at me, like you're the only thing that matters." I'd tried to dismiss it, tried to convince myself this was just protection, just contract obligation. But watching Luca now, his desperate eyes, his careful distance like he was afraid of what he'd do if he got too close, I knew the truth. Somewhere between the parking lot and this moment, I'd become more than an employee. I'd become his weakness. And in Luca Moretti's world, weaknesses got you killed. The compound sat on the edge of a lake that looked like it belonged in a postcard water, so clear you could see rocks beneath the surface. Trees turning gold and crimson with October's bite, mountains rising in the distance like sentinels. beautiful in a haunting, isolated way that made me understand why Luca had chosen it. No neighbors for miles. One road in, heavily monitored. Guards stationed at the perimeter in rotations Marco orchestrated with military precision. A fortress disguised as a vacation home, and I was both guest and prisoner within its walls. "It's not permanent," Luca said on our first morning. Finding me on the dock with coffee I'd brewed myself in the surprisingly modern kitchen. "Just until Alessandro's dealt with." Dealt with. I repeated the euphemism, watching mist rise off the water. "You mean killed?" "I mean neutralized." He lowered himself to sit beside me, his leg brushing mine. "Does the method matter to you?" "It should have. A month ago it would have. But I'd watched men breach our home, had seen the casual violence in their eyes, had understood with crystalline clarity that they would have killed me, killed my father, without hesitation." "No," I admitted quietly. "It doesn't." His hand found mine, fingers threading together with startling naturalness. We sat like that as the sun burned through mist, turning the lake into liquid gold. Two people who'd been strangers weeks ago, now bound by violence and proximity, and something neither of us was brave enough to name yet. My father thrived in the compound's peace. His color improved, his strength returning with the excellent care and reduced stress. I'd find him afternoons on the porch with Marco, the two of them fishing in comfortable silence, and wonder at the surreal domesticity of it all. My father befriending a man who'd probably killed dozens, in a house owned by a man who'd definitely killed more. "You need to learn to protect yourself," Luca announced one afternoon, appearing with a handgun that looked deadly and efficient in his capable hands. "I'm a nurse. I save lives." "Not." "The men who came to the penthouse wouldn't have cared about your Hippocratic oath." He guided me to the makeshift range he'd set up behind the house, his body close behind mine, adjusting my stance with professional detachment that somehow felt more intimate than any touch we'd shared. "They would have killed you to hurt me. You need to be able to defend yourself." The gun was heavier than I expected. Cold metal and potential violence condensed into something I could hold in two hands. Like this. His arms came around me, positioning my grip, his breath warm against my ear. "Don't anticipate the recoil. Let it happen. Squeeze, don't pull." I fired. The kick jolted through my arms, and the target remained untouched. Again. We spent an hour like that, him teaching me with infinite patience, me slowly understanding the mechanics of taking a life if necessary. By the end I could hit the center mass. Not perfectly, but enough. "Good," he murmured, and the approval in his voice shouldn't have warmed me the way it did. That night, over dinner, my father insisted on cooking, his strength returning enough for such small joys. I told stories about my residency disasters. The patient who'd propositioned me during a rectal exam. The attending physician who'd fallen asleep mid-surgery and denied it. The intern who'd accidentally texted his mother instead of his girlfriend and created HR nightmares. Luca laughed. Actually laughed a sound so unexpected, so genuine, it stopped me mid-sentence. His whole face transformed, years falling away, letting me glimpse the man he'd been before violence became his language. "What?" He caught my stare, his smile lingering. "Nothing. I shook my head. You should laugh more often." "Haven't had much reason to in a long time." His eyes held mine across the table. "Not until recently." The weight in those words settled over me like a blanket. Days blurred into weeks. The compound became a strange bubble outside reality, mornings teaching my father Tai Chi on the dock. Afternoons reading medical journals while Luca worked from his office, evenings cooking together in the kitchen like we were playing house instead of hiding from assassins. But beneath the domesticity, tension coiled tighter. Every accidental touch felt electric. Every shared glance lingered too long. The air between us grew heavy with unspoken things, with the awareness that the contract's 6-month mark was approaching fast. 4 months down, 2 to go. I found myself lying awake at night, listening to Luca move through the house, wondering what would happen when my obligation ended. If I'd really want to leave, or if this cage had become home in ways I wasn't ready to examine. What happens when the contract ends? I asked one evening. We stood on the dock, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of fire. His shoulder brushed mine, and neither of us moved away. Luca's jaw tightened. You leave. You get your freedom back. Your father gets continued care, and you get the money to finish medical school. Everything promised. And you? I go back to my life. But his voice carried no conviction. Business. Chicago. The family obligations I've been neglecting. That's what you want? I turned to face him, my heart hammering. Me to leave? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes stole my breath. Hunger, fear, desperation. A man drowning and pretending he could still breathe. What I want, he said quietly, and what's good for you are two different things. Sophia, let me decide what's good for me. You don't understand what you're asking. His hand rose, cupping my face with devastating gentleness. I'm not a good man. I've done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. My world is blood and violence and choices that stain your soul black. You deserve. I kissed him, and the world collapsed to just this. His sharp intake of breath, his hand tightening on my face, the way he froze for one heartbeat before kissing me back with desperate intensity. His other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me against him like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. The kiss tasted like inevitability, like all the tension of the past weeks finally breaking through restraint. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Sophia, don't. I pressed my fingers to his lips. Don't tell me this is a mistake. Don't tell me I'll regret this. I'm tired of people deciding what's good for me. You should be tired of me trapping you. His voice came rough, raw. That's what this is. What I've done? Trapped you with contracts and money and protection you wouldn't have needed if you'd never met me. Maybe. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Or maybe you gave me something I didn't know I needed. Before he could respond, Marcos's voice cut through the moment. Mr. Moretti, your mother is here. Luca went absolutely still. What? She arrived 20 minutes ago. Said she was concerned and flew in from Tuscany. Marco's expression suggested this was not a welcome development. She's waiting in the living room. The drive back to the house felt charged with unfinished conversation. Luca's hand found mine in the darkness, his thumb tracing circles on my palm that sent electricity up my arm. Neither of us spoke, but words felt unnecessary now. The woman waiting in the living room was small, elegant, with silver threading through dark hair and eyes exactly like her son's. She took one look at us, Luca's rumpled clothes, my flushed face, our joined hands, and smiled with knowing satisfaction. Finalmente, she said, pulling Luca into an embrace. You bring a woman to the lake house. I thought I'd die before seeing this day, Mama. Luca's voice carried warning and affection. This is Sophia Chun. She's the nurse who saved your life. Yes, Marco told me. She turned to me, her gaze sharp and assessing. And now you save him in other ways, I think. Heat crept up my neck. Mrs. Moretti, Isabella, per favor, we are family now, yes? She patted my cheek with maternal warmth. Come, you will tell me about yourself over dinner. And Luca will stop looking at you like a starving man for 5 minutes so we can eat civilized. Dinner was surreal. Isabella told stories about Luca as a boy, the time he'd stolen his father's car at 12 to drive his sick grandmother to the hospital. The way he'd defended smaller kids from bullies despite being scrawny himself. His absolute devotion to his younger brother Enzo. He was always the protector, she said, her eyes distant with memory. Too much responsibility on such young shoulders. His father demanded perfection, and Luca, she touched her son's hand across the table. He tried to give it, even when it cost him his childhood. I watched Luca's jaw tighten, watched him retreat behind control that his mother cut through with effortless, maternal precision. After dinner, Isabella pulled me aside while Luca took a phone call in his office. My son hasn't been alive. Truly alive since Enzo died, she said quietly. He breathes. He goes through motions. But the light went out of him 3 years ago. Her hand gripped mine. Until now. Until you. I see it in his eyes when he looks at you. He's fighting his way back. I don't know if I'm enough. You are. She smiled, sad and certain. You saw him bleeding and didn't run. You see the violence he carries and don't flinch. That is everything to a man like Luca. To be seen, truly seen, and not abandoned. Later. I found Luca on the dock again, staring at water that reflected the moon in fractured silver. I sat beside him, our shoulders touching, the silence comfortable now. Your mother is terrifying, I said. She always has been. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. She likes you. She doesn't like anyone. She loves you. That's different, is it? He turned to face me, and in the moonlight I saw every wall he'd built crumbling. Sophia, I need to tell you something. The contract, it was an excuse. My heart stuttered. What? I could have protected you without it. Could have stationed guards at your apartment, gotten your father into private care, kept Alessandro away from you, all without trapping you here. His hand found my face, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. But I needed you close, needed a reason that made sense. That didn't reveal how completely you'd undone me from the moment you pressed your hands against my wound. Luca, I'm not a good man, Sophia. I've killed people. I'll kill more. My hands are stained with blood that will never wash clean. His voice cracked. But with you, God, with you I want to be. I want to be the man you see when you look at me. The man your father trusts. The man who deserves someone with kind eyes and a brave heart. Tears burned my throat. You already are that man. I'm not, but maybe. He swallowed hard. Maybe I could become him, if you stayed. If you chose this. Chose me, not because of contracts or money or obligation, but because you want to. I kissed him first this time, pouring everything I couldn't say into the touch, all my fear and hope and the terrifying realization that I'd fallen completely for a dangerous man who looked at me like I was salvation. When we broke apart, he pulled me against his chest, his heart thundering beneath my ear. The contract ends in 2 months, I whispered. I know. And then? His arms tightened. And then you're free to walk away. Or, he paused, vulnerability raw in his voice, or you choose to stay, not as my employee. As something more. I tilted my head back to meet his eyes. I choose to stay, I said. I choose you. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the compound's front door like a snake. I found it during my morning coffee, a cream envelope with no postage, no return address. Just my name written in elegant script that made my skin crawl. Inside, a single photograph, me and my father on the dock, taken with a telephoto lens from somewhere in the trees. And below it, 3 words in Italian I didn't need to translate to understand their meaning. Sappiamo dove sei. We know where you are. Luca! My voice came out strangled. He appeared from his office within seconds, Marco right behind him. One look at the letter and his expression transformed into something that belonged in Nightmare's cold, calculated rage that made the air itself feel dangerous. Lock it down, he ordered Marco. Every entrance, every window. No one in or out without my explicit approval. And find out how they got close enough to deliver this. More letters came over the next week. My father's doctor in Chicago received calls asking about his dialysis schedule. The nursing school I'd applied to got inquiries about my enrollment status. Someone hacked my email, reading messages between me and old friends, learning details about my life I'd never shared with Luca. They were mapping me, cataloging my vulnerabilities, showing Luca exactly how many ways they could hurt him by destroying me. He became something feral. Sleeping maybe 3 hours a night, stationed in the security room watching monitors, his weapon always within reach. The compound filled with additional guards until I couldn't move without tripping over armed men. I'd wake at 2 a.m. to find him standing in my doorway, checking I was still breathing, still safe, still his. This is because of me, I said one night, finding him in his office surrounded by surveillance photos and threat assessments. They're doing this because I matter to you. Yes, no denial, no softening the truth. You've become my weakness, Sophia. And Alessandro knows it. Then let me leave. Let me take Dad back to Chicago, disappear somewhere they won't. No. The word came absolute, final. He crossed to me with predatory intensity, his hands framing my face. You think I could survive watching you walk away knowing they'd hunt you? Knowing every moment you weren't in my sight could be the moment I lose you? Luca, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly for the first time in years. He pulled me against him, his forehead pressed to mine. And I know exactly what I need to do. He stepped back, and something in his expression made my breath catch. Determination mixed with fear. Desperation wrapped in control. Marry me. The words hung in the air between us, not a question but a command disguised as a request. What? Marry me, Sophia. Not next year, not next month. Now. Tomorrow if possible. His hands gripped my shoulders. A wife has legal protections an employee doesn't. Rights that make her harder to touch, to threaten, to use. As my wife, you become part of the family structure. Untouchable by code, even my enemies respect. You want to marry me for protection. I want to marry you because the thought of existing in a world where you're not mine makes me want to burn everything down. His voice cracked. The protection is just the excuse I'm using to justify asking before we've even been together a full season. Before I've earned the right to keep you permanently. My heart hammered against my ribs. This is insane. Probably. He pulled a small box from his pocket. When had he gotten that? And opened it to reveal a ring that looked antique, beautiful, terrifyingly real. But insanity is all I have left. They know where you are. They know what you mean to me. Every second you're unprotected is a second they could take you. And his control shattered. I can't lose you, Sophia. I can't. I've lost everyone I've ever loved. And I cannot survive losing you too. The raw desperation in his voice broke me. Is this what you want? I whispered. Really want? Not strategy, not protection, not chess moves against enemies. Do you want me as your wife? His eyes met mine, dark and burning with intensity that stole my breath. You're all I want, he breathed. Every morning I wake up and you're still here is a gift I don't deserve. Every moment you look at me without fear is a miracle. You're everything, Sophia. My only good thing in a life full of darkness. So yes, I want you as my wife. I want you bound to me in every way possible. I want the world to know you're mine and I'm yours, and anyone who threatens that will face consequences that make hell look merciful. I should have said no. Should have demanded time, demanded normal courtship, demanded he court me properly, instead of proposing out of fear and desperation. Instead, I heard myself whisper, yes. The ring slid onto my finger, a perfect fit. Like he'd known my size, like this had been inevitable from the moment I pressed my hands against his wound in that parking lot months ago. We married 48 hours later in the compound's garden. Marco and Bianca as witnesses, my father crying tears of joy he tried to hide, and a priest who asked no questions about the rushed ceremony or the armed guards stationed at every corner. Luca slid a second ring onto my finger, and when he kissed me as his wife, I tasted desperation and devotion and promises that scared me with their intensity. You're not my employee anymore, he whispered against my lips, his hand protective over mine where the rings gleamed. You're my wife, and somehow that changed everything. The nausea started 3 weeks after the wedding. At first, I blamed stress, the constant security, the isolation, the weight of being Luca Moretti's wife instead of his employee. But when the exhaustion hit, when my coffee tasted wrong and my body felt foreign, I knew. I took the test in the bathroom at 5 a.m., while Luca slept and the compound lay quiet. 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours, watching that second line appear with crystalline clarity. Pregnant. I pressed my hand to my still flat stomach, my mind reeling. A baby. We were bringing a child into Luca's world, a world of threats and violence and armed guards at every door. This was insane. This was dangerous. This was Sophia. Luca's voice drifted from the bedroom. You okay? I shoved the test into my pocket and splashed water on my face, trying to compose myself. But when I emerged, he took one look at me and knew something was wrong. What happened? He crossed to me in 2 strides, his hands framing my face. Tell me, the words stuck in my throat. How did you tell a man like Luca Moretti that you were pregnant? How did you bring a child into a life where death waited around every corner? His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. Whatever it is, we'll handle it. Together. The certainty in his voice broke through my fear. I pulled the test from my pocket and placed it in his hand. He stared at it for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, impossibly, his knees buckled. Luca Moretti, the man who'd faced down assassins without flinching, who commanded an empire built on violence, dropped to his knees in our bathroom, the pregnancy test clutched in his shaking hand. Luca, his arms wrapped around my waist, his face pressing against my stomach with a vulnerability that shattered every wall I'd ever built. His shoulders shook, and I realized with shock that he was crying. A family, he breathed against the fabric of my nightgown. We're making a family. My hands found his hair, threading through dark strands as tears burned my own eyes. Is this? Everything. He looked up at me, his face wet with tears he didn't bother hiding. This is everything I never thought I'd have. Everything I didn't deserve, but somehow got anyway. He stood, pulling me against him with desperate gentleness, his hand splaying protectively over my stomach. I'll keep you both safe. I swear it. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to eliminate, you and this child will never know danger. Luca, the world you live in will change. The conviction in his voice left no room for argument. I'm already transitioning control to Marco, legitimate businesses only. No more direct involvement in the violence. By the time this baby's born, I'll be, he paused, searching for words. I'll be someone they can be proud of. Later that morning, I wandered into his office, searching for him. He was on the phone, speaking rapid Italian, but gestured for me to enter. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, waiting, my gaze drifting to the massive safe in the corner. The safe stood open. Inside I could see files, documents, stacks of cash and something else, a familiar folder. My contract. Luca ended his call and caught me staring. Something flickered in his expression, guilt, maybe, or resignation. You should see it, he said quietly, moving to the safe. He pulled out the contract, the papers I'd signed months ago that had bound me to him, and handed them to me. I opened the folder. The original contract was there, every clause I'd agreed to, every term that had defined my life. But paper-clipped to the front was a bank statement, dated 3 months ago, showing a deposit of $200,000 into an account in my name. My hands started shaking. This is the full payment. Luca's voice came soft, careful. Deposited 90 days after you arrived. The contract specified 6 months, but he swallowed hard. I couldn't hold you with obligation anymore. Couldn't bear the thought that you stayed because you felt trapped. 3 months ago. The words barely worked past my constricted throat. You paid me in full 3 months ago and never told me. I was afraid. The admission came raw, stripped of his usual control. Afraid that if you knew you were free, really free, you'd leave. That without the contract binding you, you'd realize you didn't want this life. Didn't want me. So you let me believe that you had no choice. Yes. His jaw tightened. Selfish. Manipulative. Everything you have every right to be furious about. But, Sophia, He moved closer, dropping to his knees again, his hands finding mine. I fell in love with you somewhere between the parking lot and the penthouse, and I didn't know how to tell you. Didn't know how to say that the woman I'd trapped with contracts and money had become the only thing in my life that mattered. I stared at him, this dangerous, broken man on his knees in front of me, offering truth when lies would have been easier. You love me. Not a question. A revelation. Desperately, completely, his hands tightened on mine. You're not my employee anymore. You haven't been for months. You're my wife. You're my everything. And if you want to live, if you take that money and walk away, I'll let you go. I'll protect you and our child from a distance. I'll give you the freedom you deserve, even if it destroys me. The tears came then, hot and fast. You idiot! He flinched. I didn't stay because of the contract. I pulled him up, my hands framing his face. I stayed because of you. Because somewhere between your wounds and my fear, I fell in love with you too. The money, the protection, the contract, none of it mattered anymore. I chose you, Luca. I choose you. His kiss tasted like salt and relief, and promises neither of us had been brave enough to voice until now. I'm never letting you go, he whispered against my lips, his hand protective over our child. Good, I whispered back. Because I'm not going anywhere. 6 months after the wedding, I walked across a stage in a cap and gown that barely fit over my growing belly. Accepting my medical degree with my father, cheering from the audience and Luca watching with an expression that looked suspiciously like pride. Dr. Sophia Moretti. The hyphenated name still felt surreal. I'm so proud of you, Luca whispered that night, his hand resting on my stomach where our daughter kicked with increasing frequency. My brilliant wife. My doctor. Our doctor, I corrected, covering his hand with mine. She needs someone who knows what they're doing when she arrives. He kissed my temple, his touch reverent. 2 more months. Then we meet her. But our daughter had other plans. She arrived 3 weeks early on a snowy February morning, screaming her entrance into the world with fierce determination that made the delivery nurses laugh. 8 pounds of perfect, furious life. With Luca's dark hair and my features and lungs that announced she would not be ignored. I'd never seen Luca cry before that moment in the hospital, not even when I'd told him about the pregnancy. But holding our daughter for the first time, this man who'd built an empire on violence wept openly, pressing kisses to her tiny forehead with shaking hands. Isabella, he breathed, naming her after his mother. Isabella Maria Moretti. Our miracle. My father held his granddaughter with tears streaming down his face, his health stabilized enough now that his doctors called it remarkable. Marco stood in the doorway trying to look professional while clearly fighting emotion. Even Bianca dabbed at her eyes. We brought Isabella home to a nursery that looked like something from a magazine, soft colors and careful safety and love poured into every corner. But it was the changes outside that room that mattered more. Luca had kept his promise. The business was transitioning, legitimate ventures replacing dangerous ones. Marco handling anything that required the old methods, while Luca focused on building something clean for our daughter's future. The compound had become a real home instead of a fortress, though security remained tight. Some things couldn't change entirely. 3 months after Isabella's birth, I opened my clinic, a small building in the neighborhood where I'd grown up, offering free medical care to people who couldn't afford it otherwise. Funded anonymously by my husband, though everyone knew, nobody questioned. The community just accepted the gift. You're changing lives, Luca said, visiting me during my first week. Isabella strapped to his chest in a carrier that looked ridiculous and perfect on a man who used to terrify grown men. Making a difference. We're changing lives, I corrected. This clinic exists because of you. It exists because of you. He kissed me softly, carefully, like I was precious. Because you saw a man bleeding and decided to save him. Because you kept saving me, over and over, until I remembered how to be human. That night. After Isabella was asleep, and the house had settled into quiet, Luca led me to his office. The safe stood open, the contract folder sitting on his desk. I should have done this months ago, he said, feeding pages into the fireplace. Should have burned this the moment I realized I loved you. I watched the contract curl and blacken, releasing me from bonds that had stopped mattering long ago. The flames consumed signatures and terms and the fiction we'd maintained to justify what was really happening. You saved my life, Luca said, echoing words from that first night in the penthouse. His arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulders. We watched the papers burn. That night in the parking lot, you pressed your hands against my wound and refused to let me die. But you kept saving me after that, from my guilt, from my darkness, from the belief that I deserved nothing good. You saved me too, I whispered. From desperation, from drowning, from a life of just surviving instead of living. His hand found my left hand, thumb brushing over the rings that had replaced the contract as symbols of our bond. You're not my employee anymore, I turned in his arms. Meeting his eyes, those dark, intense eyes that had memorized my face in a parking lot, and never looked away. I know, I said softly. I'm your wife. I'm your partner. I'm the mother of your child and the woman who chose you, every single day, for the rest of our lives. His kiss tasted like promise and permanence, like the future we'd built from broken pieces and desperate choices. Behind us, the contract burned to ash. Ahead of us, Isabella slept peacefully in her nursery. Around us, the life we'd created from blood and fear and unexpected love. We were home. Not in the compound or the penthouse, not in any physical space, but in each other. In the family we'd chosen and built and protected with everything we had. And it was more than enough. It was everything.